Everyone, I had a fantastic conversation with Lady Dane. And before we jump into that, I just wanted to make sure that we prioritized a land acknowledgement. So we are opening this conversation with the acknowledgement that the land on which I am gathered is occupied territory. This is true for anywhere we gather in the United States. It is the traditional land and the ancestral home to Native American, Indigenous, and First Nations peoples. At present, I am on the unceded territory of the Omaha and the Oceti-Sakowin in what is known as colonized Omaha, Nebraska. We invite you to familiarize yourself with both the Omaha tribe and the Oceti-Sakowin if you are joining us from Omaha, Nebraska. As we collectively recognize our participation in the ongoing process of colonization, we invite everyone individually to make that connection and to take that first step this week and in the next weeks to come that would further your education about the Indigenous peoples of your region and how you can combat anti-Indigeneity. Thank you, everyone, and I hope you enjoy the conversation. So this is a Crossroads conversation hosted by K&R Strategies in partnership with the BLUEBARN Theatre. And this conversation is called Imagining New Ways of Being. My name is Katherine MacHolmes. I use she, her pronouns. I am a co-founder and principal strategist with K&R Strategies. And I also have the good fortune of serving as an equity, diversity, and inclusion advocate with the BLUEBARN Theatre. And here with me today is...
Hi, I'm Lady Dane Figueroa Edidi. I'm the playwright, and I'm also acting in for Black trans girls who gotta cuss a motherfucker out when snatching your hedge ain't enough.
I love that straight look into the camera, like, gotta say the title right with the soul and the feeling in it.
Also, just trying, I'm trying to like get my chapstick together too, child. I'm like,
so Lady Dane, it is such an immense pleasure for me to chat with you really briefly. I have some questions. I really want to explore in this time, like who you are and what you were willing to share with us about who you are. So I know you introduced yourself, but like really introduce yourself. Like tell us what we should know about you, your life, and your art.
yeah, oh my gosh, that's such like a loaded question, right? Like that's a whole, I'm like, child, check out me on one of the podcasts or something, honey, because well, I am originally from Baltimore, Maryland. I am the daughter of a Nigerian Muslim immigrant. I am also the daughter of a Cuban and Indigenous American Black woman. My Nigerian daddy's Black too, y'all. You got to clarify nowadays, okay? And I am a performance artist. I am a playwright. I'm an author. I have 14 books published. I'm a poet. I am a screenwriter. I am an actor, a singer, dancer, choreographer. I'm an award-winning playwright. I won a Helen Hayes in 2020 for my play Clytemnestra. I'm a cultural worker. I'm a priestess. I'm a healer. Yeah, I'm I'm an advocate.
So you don't do anything is what I'm hearing. So I'm really excited that you brought up healer and priestess and this, because what I was noticing as I was doing a little bit of background, but also having interacted with your gorgeous work, your script, doing a little bit of research around the Black Trans Prayer Book, what I noticed is this really gorgeous, like soulful theme around, or themes of like spirituality, ancestry, and divinity, and that they're woven throughout descriptions of you and your art, right? So like I came across descriptions of goddess and priestess and healer, and your works, right, for Black trans girls, and the Black Trans Prayer Book. So I'm interested in like what calls you to incorporate these themes into your life and into your art.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that what we call now trans people, right? Like we have existed throughout time within all types of communities, particularly those who are indigenous to the Americas, indigenous to the like Africa, right? And that we were honored, we were revered, we oftentimes held positions of spiritual power and prominence. We were essential to the thriving, not just the survival of our communities, but the thriving of our communities, and that we were viewed as a part of the divinity that is being. And so, white supremacy and colonization has attempted to strip that knowledge and that self-awareness from so many trans people. And so I think that it's important for me as someone who is a priestess, a historian, a cultural worker, um, the daughter of amazing, amazing individuals in relationship to the trans community, myself, yes, being trans, that my work speaks to that legacy, that deep, deep, deep ancestral legacy that trans people are continuing.
Yeah, thank you. As part of my own journey, I've been thinking a lot about ancestry and right and the ways in which that has been um, really truncated by white supremacy, um, and how that can leave folks feeling untethered in a way. And so I think I was just really drawn to like this really like feel it from the soles of your feet into your heart, like from the earth, like aspect that is such like woven like really beautifully and really just tremendously into your work. So thank you for sharing that with me and with us.
Oh, of course, of course. I mean, I think about part of the work that we do with the Black Trans Prayer Book. I'm co-editor of the book and co-director of the you know, organization. And that is, we understand the relationship between um, you know, religious violence and
Mm,
and the traumas that trans people deal with. And so it's important for us to name the harm and to work to dismantle these systems. Because I think sometimes when we talk about liberation, right, we think about liberation oftentimes simply in terms of systems.
mm,
But you know, just as we understand that technologies are embodied, right? Some of these systems also become internalized. And so,
absolutely.
therefore, like part of the healing process, part of the liberation process is to really also work on dismantling the system of white supremacy internally and systematically, because that's true freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so, and through that dismantling, which is a constant, there's a healing that takes place because then we're able to actually operate within clarity to recognize that a lot of the lies that were told about trans people are not true from these oppressive transphobic systems. Trans people are divine, we are worthy, and we are essential. And I truly do believe that a world free of oppression is possible, but not without Black trans people, not without Indigenous trans people.
Absolutely. There is nothing I can say after that. So, period. Um, I so I'm gonna quote you to yourself, and then I'm
Okay.
gonna ask you about that. Stop it. You're like, I do all these things. I'm not brilliant enough to be quoted. Yes, you are. Stop.
Well, I never said I wasn't brilliant enough to be quoted. Okay, no.
You're absolutely right. That was me saying, just in case you forgot for a split second, even though you probably didn't. Um, so this quote Now I'm nervous that I'm going to read you your own quote.
Oh gosh.
It's just the way that we help to combat white supremacy is to be in community with one another. Because I believe it's the job of the artist and the job of art, one of the holy gifts or rotations or callings, is that it helps us imagine new ways of being. I'm fighting for liberation, not just for myself. I'm fighting for liberation for all of us. In turn, that means that I must also be aware of the needs of my community. That's so
Where
gorgeous.
did I say that? I probably said that on a show or something, right?
I don't know. Barry was like, I love this. And I was like, I too love this.
Yeah, I think I meant, yeah. That sounds like something I would say.
It seems right. It's on brand. So in this quote, when you refer to community, who is community and what is community to you?
Yeah, who is community? Black trans people,
Mm-hmm.
spirit workers who are invested in doing good.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay, invested in doing good. Um, Other cultural workers who are fighting for liberation, people who understand that trans people deserve agency and autonomy. Um, some members of my family, some members of my family of blood or choice,
Yeah.
Yeah, indigenous trans peoples, um, you know, I mean, that's just a few, right? That's just
Yeah.
artists, right? Other artists who are invested in creating a world in which we are all able to enjoy the full fruits of who we are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, that's just a few.
Just to say a few, the least. Um, no, and I think that that's really beautiful. It is beautiful when we have a defined sense of community, of like who our people are. Um, what do you think informs that community? Like when we think of the word community, right? Because when we're in liberation work, you hear like, let's be in community together.
Yeah.
And so I'm interested in, what do you think to be in community means?
I think it's a space of it's a space of affirmation. It's a space that is supposed to be safe.
Mm-hmm.
It is a space where if harm happens, accountability is prioritized. It is a space where healing is possible. It is a space that is invested in um, not simply my survival, but also, I should say, and also my thriving.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's what and vice versa, right? Like I think that that's what it means to be in community. I think that um, for so many people, community, the word or the term community has been kind of thrown around in the same ways that the word love has been thrown around, when really what's meant by some folks is abuser dynamics and abusive relationships and abusive cycles.
Yeah.
And so I think that, like, when I think about community, I think about people who are truly, truly, truly invested in the things that I talked about, love, accountability, healing, safety, affirmation, and making a world that we all get to, enjoy a freedom from all oppression. Um, and so that's what I think it means to be in community. Um, yeah.
Oof, thank you for that. So in the quote, you also talk about the job of the artist in community. And so I'm interested in your job description of the job of the artist.
Well, I think, I talk about often in very many of my podcasts, well, not my podcast, but like podcasts that I've been a guest on, right? Or interviews that I've been a guest on. Um, I talk about often the fact that I think that, the artist is truly, truly one of the gifts of the artist is to help us imagine new ways of being. And so what that means to me, for example, right, is that like when we say things like, defund the police, right? Like just to use like a slogan that like people, you
Don't know
know,
what it means.
throw around right nowadays.
Mhm.
The political system, right, and also white supremacy attempts to, well, I will say it like this: white supremacy specifically attempts to deaden the imagination. And the political system in particular is invested in its own survival, right? It believes that citizens, systems, all things are in service to it.
Mhm.
So it also, in very many ways, is not invested in trying to operate differently.
Mhm.
It is about reinforcing, right, its own way of existing.
Mhm.
White supremacy through violence, through coercion, um, through incentivizing white supremacist ideologies, um, also does not, while it is also trying to deaden the imagination, it is actively destroying what is um, what is what is liberation? You can't have white supremacy and liberation. And dare I say, you can't even have white supremacy, let alone democracy, existing in the same place. Those two
Absolutely.
things don't exist together. One has to give way to the other. Um, and so when we say, for example, defund the police, sometimes perhaps um, people who are in the realm of the political or are within political spheres of, because everything's political, we can pretend like it's not, but all of it's
It
political,
is.
and those who are only invested in like reinforcing a white supremacist status quo
Mm.
will say it's impossible.
Mhm.
But
Yes.
the artist actually creates for us scenarios in which that possibility is a lived reality, even if it is in a world that we are experiencing through our imagination.
Mhm.
And so it's like, okay, well, this is where it could go wrong. This is where it could go right. This is where, so if we know where it can go wrong and we know where it can go right, then what are the things, how do we need to shift the culture, right, in order for it to go right?
Yes, yes.
And the
Yes.
artist helps us be able to imagine that.
And yes, everything that you're saying, and I would point to, in terms of history, like oftentimes with like overtly oppressive regimes, art and artists and academics are some of the first people to be targeted, and that is because of the power of art to help us radically reimagine and dream beyond. Like, yes,
Absolutely.
everything that you're saying.
Well, I
um
mean, I think that we have to think about the ways in which art is utilized here in this country, right? I think that we like to think that the United States is the land of the free, the home of the brave, all these things, but the United States has not reckoned with its history. And so that's why it seems to us that every 20 to 10 to annual every year, right? That
yeah.
it seems like we are being confronted with having to have this conversation about dismantling white supremacy. Time and time again, this evil white
Mm-hmm.
supremacy um, has um, has been allowed by certain people who are in structural power to continue to exist, even though it is literally um, trying to kill the country.
Yeah. And
And no, oh, and I was just gonna say, and
yeah.
like, so when we talk about like, the ways in which overtly authoritarian systems, countries would go after the artists, look at the ways in which, right, if we live in a capitalistic society, look at the ways in which our society actually undervalues. And when I say our society, I should say, I should,
The white supremacist,
the
capitalist,
white
cis
supremacist
heteropatriarchy.
capitalistic system that, how it purposefully attempts to undervalue the lives, the work, the existence of artists. Like,
Mm-hmm.
art was literally one of the highest monetary makers of New York. And
Mm-hmm.
yet, so many in New York, and so many artists in New York are starving.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that? They are underpaid. Why is that?
Yes. And it's accepted that to be an artist means that you will be you will be a starving artist. And it is like an accepted, like there's this accepting of a reduction and an inherent trauma to the way that artists are supposed to live. And then, right, because of the capitalist system, you get into this like battle of like, if I do not deserve to thrive if I am being true to my art, right? Because that is also something that is being like people are conditioned with.
It's the lie, right? It's
Yeah.
part of that lie. And it's because art itself, right? The artists were also the spirit workers. The
Mm,
artists were also, theater did not start in Greece. And whenever we start to study theater with Euripides and etc., theater actually started in Africa. It started in ceremony. It started in
mm,
this idea of channeling, right? This idea of telling stories in order to,
mm,
that is a part of the griot tradition, that is a direct link to Africa, right? And so, you know, I it does not shock me that the ways in which artists are treated in this place. And I think that when people so often think about artists, right, they're thinking about Hollywood folks. But even when you look at the treatment that Hollywood folks go through, and you look at, we can have a conversation about like the coin and them needing to like be a little bit better and be in community with other folks, right, and really
right.
fight for liberation.
That's
But
right.
I mean, we're just literally um you know, Black folks have been fighting for years and decades and ages. Indigenous folks have been fighting for years and decades and ages. Brown folks have been fighting for years and decades and ages to be able to like tell our own stories and have
Mm,
financial backing from big producers. And just
mm,
now are we seeing people like the Ava DuVernays and Lena Waifs, right, being celebrated, the Janet Mocks, right? And then even
yes.
then, we're told it can only be one
Yes.
because because the system isn't actually invested in community. It's
Mm-hmm.
invested in its own survival
Mm-hmm.
by any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I don't know how we got on this topic, but I do think that, what has happened, I think, in this age is that so many people are not having to go through big studios now in order to have their work witnessed by other folks. There's so many Black trans women doing so much digital work, and probably can't cuss. It's brilliant.
Don't look at me because I'd be like, yes, you can.
Although I
Uh,
did cuss earlier in the title. Oh gosh. Well, it's like, so many Black trans people are doing so much digital work, and it's brilliant, right? And it's like, but people also got to eat. So it would
yes.
be nice for producers and et cetera, to pour that coin, to pour that
Mm,
access into trans communities of color. Um,
yeah.
because, oh, child, I said, if you watch out what some of folks can do with a budget of like 40K that they raise through mutual aid with their friends, imagine what they could do with a budget of $1 million, with stories they could tell.
Yeah.
And when you ain't got to worry about eating, you can do a lot of things.
Listen. Yup. Well, and to this point of like because there is a legacy of, and I'll speak from, we're both Black women, so I'll speak from that perspective specifically, is like this idea that like integral to survival in America of Black people is this, like, you are given scraps and you make masterpieces. And so it's, and from the outside of the trans community as a cis person looking in, like I see that with balls, and like with people with trans women like creating costumes and masterpieces of costumes and like to show up. And so of course it's like, if you had nothing and you create this stunning piece, what could you do? How revolutionary, how life-changing, how world-changing could you be with funding?
Well, I mean, like you know, I want to, let me also clarify what I said earlier. I said,
Oh, please.
I phrased that when I said, imagine what you could do when you don't have to worry about eating. What I meant was, imagine what you could do if you don't have to worry about how you're gonna eat.
Yes.
That's number one. I want to be clear
Yes.
about that. And then two, they're already creating that work. Anyway,
Yeah.
they're already creating world shifting, life changing, life altering, dynamic work, right? I mean, like Madonna went to the ball culture to appropriate Vogue, right?
Right.
Like people are traveling to the communities, right, that are creating the brilliance, oftentimes stealing from those communities and then making profit off of those communities. And so like the life-changing world, like life-changing, affirming, world-shaking, shifting work is already happening, right? What it is, what I'm really trying to get to like the heart of, right, is what does it mean to actually care about other people? What does it mean to actually you know, be a millionaire? And we can have a conversation about whether or not, you know, millionaires or billionaire, well, billionaires should exist, right? We can have a whole conversation about that. But like to actually have the access and the coin and say that you care enough about another human that you are willing to actually center center that human's work by way of producing it, which means you're putting coin in that person's pocket to do it. Like, because we know that those opportunities oftentimes lead to other opportunities where then that person doesn't have to worry about how they're going to eat again.
Yeah.
And we know that the impact of economic violence on Black trans people. We understand that more than half of trans people of color have made less than $10,000 per year for how many years now, while the cost of living continues to go up. Also, that is a strange thing, the cost of living. While the cost of living continues to go up, you know, there's a pandemic outside. And so, you know, artistic institutions, Hollywood actually does have the ability, even beyond this kind of like, oh, look at what story we're telling, look who we're hiring to act, right? They actually do have the ability to really, really be transformative and be at the forefront of not just the types of conversations we want to be having, but truly, truly, truly transforming people's lives and investing in transformative justice and paying back what they owe. Because every piece, every real estate, every movie studio is on stolen land.
Yep.
Every piece of wealth that was built in this country was built by was made by the enslavement of indigenous Africans. And so it is owed to communities of color. It is owed to indigenous people. It is owed to Black people for theatrical institutions, film studios, to want to be, to seek, and to do the work, the accountability work of being in right relationship with us, period.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what I'm supposed to say after that. I just need to let that linger for a minute. Yeah. And this another theme in our conversation right now that keeps emerging is right, we're talking about white supremacy, we're talking about what it means to be in community, we're talking about the ways in which white supremacy really dins and deadens the imagination. It also deadens folks' ability to be in community with each other. And I noticed this particularly in my work with white folks who are trying to orient to anti-racism, and just seeing the ways in which white folks really struggle to even be with each other unless there's like a capitalistic output.
Right.
Because like two Black people that have never met, if there's like, we'll find something to talk about. If there's a group of Black folks sitting around at somebody's house, there's probably a deck of cards, there's some food. If food isn't there, it'll be made, right? Like we know how to kick it with each other. And so this idea of like wealthy, privileged, especially white people, not understanding how to be in community with each other, to me is just, it seems to be a symptom of white supremacy culture.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that white supremacy culture's focus, right, is on the individual, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and attempts, right, to say to us that the only folks that you need to care about is your immediate family unit.
Yes.
Right. As
Yes.
opposed to, so that's why you also have, right, the land reacting the way that it reacts, Mother Earth acting the way that she acts. That's why you have climate change now, is because that kind of selfishness, I'll say selfishness, I'll just call it what it is also, it translates to the ways in which they treat the land.
Yes. And animals.
Yep.
Yeah, all of that. And because there is a direct correlation between the way that industrial agriculture treats the land and treats animals, and the way that we have normalized that so much that we have translated it into how we treat each other. And like a very egregious example, of course, is mass incarceration. But like that is the most far-flung, like that same attitude, those same attitudes show up in the way that we treat strangers, in the way that people, this might be a little bit too political, so Bill, you can cut this if you need to, but like the way that people refuse to wear masks, knowing that it's for the common good and that the common good is for our good.
Yeah. People are dying. You know,
Yes.
when I enter, when I enter into conversations with folks, most of the people that I have conversations with wear masks. So that, but when I'm like talking about this kind of like politicized conversation about like, oh, well, my rights and wearing masks. And I'm like, over 500,000 people who did not have to die are dead.
Yes.
Are dead. And I think that it is really that simple. It is really that simple. And we know that wearing masks can help taper down, if not even, if not prevent, taper down the rates of infections and the spread of infections. And it is really, really, really super easy to do. And the only reason why certain folks do not want to do it, it comes down to white supremacy, period.
Yep.
And it's a shame because, if you are a person who, if you don't necessarily want to give to a charity, if you don't necessarily want to do all of these things, you can at least wear a fucking mask.
Yeah.
If you do nothing else for humanity.
Yeah. Well, and how disjointed cussed. What was that?
I said I just cussed.
I'm pretty sure once we started talking about masks, it was probably like on the cutting floor. And how disjointed is it to not even recognize that doing good for humanity is doing good for yourself? And like, that's what I mean about what white supremacy really does, is of course, like, it harms everyone. It harms
Absolutely.
Black and brown folks. It harms Black and brown, Indigenous, people of color, trans folks, like, and so, but it harms everyone. Like, this system,
It also harms white people, right?
that's,
Like
and
it also
yes, yes,
harms white people. And I think that um you know, I think it really is as simple as that.
yeah,
But this is the thing, is that it also rewards,
yep,
right? It rewards white people's complacency and complicity.
oh
And
yeah,
so for some folks, right, because we also live in a country that that pushes abuser dynamics as love, or abuser dynamics
mm,
um as a thing that is worthy for us to tolerate, just so that we can have some sense of civility, right?
yeah,
White folks have in turn attempted to outweigh, right? They weigh the balance. They say, okay, well, yes, white supremacy is hurting me, but does that outweigh, um, you know, all the other things, right? Like,
right,
does it outweigh does it outweigh the benefits, right? And then for
yeah,
some white people, um, it is a harm that they are willing to take,
mm,
because for them, they believe that they see a way out for them, right? They see a hierarchical way forward for themselves. And
yeah,
um because of that, so many white folks who will never be a millionaire or a billionaire
yeah,
imagines themselves as the Jeff Bezos, while the
yeah,
Jeff Bezos is still robbing and stealing from them.
yes. And and the middle, that middle section maintains the whole structure.
Right.
Um, yes, all the while dreaming of, which is interesting. I won't even say dreaming of, because I don't want to give away the power of the word dreaming. But thinking that it's possible to do this other thing. And so, so bringing us back, because while we have discussed the often discussed and very important need to discuss white supremacy culture, I am deeply interested in you in liberation, in dreaming and radically reimagining these systems, not these systems, but like our world.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we talk about, when you talk about new ways of being, like, that is what I'm truly interested in, is that dreaming beyond. And so, so when you, as part of your artistic process, as part of your life, when you speak of and think of reimagining new ways of being, what unveils itself to you?
That I have the right to center my own gaze in my work. Gaze, Gaze. Or because right, it sounds a lot like gaze, right? One time I was like, I don't center the white cis gaze. And someone was like, and I was like thinking to myself, it was like Gaze, y'all. I know, not the Gays. What she got against the gays? But so that's one way, right? Like that's one of many, is that I really center um Black and Indigenous trans people's gaze in my work. And that what I've learned throughout the years is that when I do that, I'm actually, that white cis people and white people, right, white trans people actually learn more
Mm-hmm.
when I don't center them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, um, yeah, I mean, I am unconcerned with their learning, right? But it's like they also get something from not being
Yeah.
centered.
Yeah.
Um, and so, which is great. Um, I you know, I attempt to invest in mutual aid with my communities, with folks in my community. Um, those are, you know, those are just like two, like, you know, concrete, tangible things that I do.
Yeah.
Um, I think, you know, as I dream of a new world, um, I must be, I understand that I have the right to be relentless in my vision for what that
Mm,
world is.
mhm,
So if I'm in a meeting with folks, if I am building relationship with folks, if I'm on a podcast and an interview with someone, um, I choose to ask the questions that are important for me to ask as I, because my goal and my agenda is that world free of oppression for everyone.
mm,
And
mhm,
so I am, you know, I'm constantly talking about more trans people of color need to be in the room. More trans people of color need to be in the room. What are you doing to pour into communities? How are you honoring the indigenous folks of your land? What are you doing to be in right relationships with Black folks? What do you, you know, these are the questions that I'm having often in these rooms. Um, and that, and that I understand that like I must be unrelenting
mm,
in that dreaming,
mm,
because white supremacy is unrelenting in its attempt to kill us all.
mhm,
And so I must be as unrelenting um, in my vision for the world.
mm. What I just want to flag as like, because I always, when I end interviews, I always ask folks about liberation. And we've been able to, through like your answers and your imagining and your willingness to kind of go here, 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 and here with me. Um, what I want to say that you, every time we talk, I'm just like, I just need to follow you around. It's like, do you need an assistant? Um,
Actually, I'm like, now listen, it's the thing, you know, people always say, do you need an assistant? I'm like, honey, you know, what is really needed, right, is assistant money. Okay.
mm, 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 mm. Um, you said, and I'm thinking about this in terms of my, from my own lens and my own work in anti-racism and anti-oppression, and something that I've been struggling with, that I seem to struggle with, and then you come and drop knowledge that I'm just like, oh, okay. Um, was just this idea of like, I am centering my own voice.
Mhm.
And even the work of anti-racism centers white people and whiteness. It like
Yeah.
inherently does, because that is the issue that we are moving away from. And I find that to be really exhausting, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, right? Which is, again, like, that is not what liberation is. And so as you're saying this, I just find that to be like deeply, this is why you're a healer. I find that to be deeply healing to hear someone say that about themselves. Um, to be so bold and so declarative and so like about yourself in a way that is also about community. And so like that for me, I think a lot about, when we talk about liberation, often we're talking about, right, liberation from systems of oppression. Um, and I believe that's possible as well. I also know the likelihood of that happening in my lifetime is low. I know that I can lay foundation work, and I am happy to do the work that and the work of ancestors, which is to lay foundations for new achieving.
I mean, maybe it's possible though, right? I think that we have been told, right? You know,
Mm,
I really love, um, give me a second, because I
yeah.
just need to text El Morgan and say, hey, I'm going to be joining. Um, hey, I think I did. Um, still in my interview, still in, hey, can they resend link? Can they resend? Still in interview. Probably will be out in the next 5.
Yeah, this is the
Um,
wrap up.
I know. I think that like, Nina Simone, she talks about in Mississippi, goddamn, right? She
Yes.
talks about
Yes. Mm,
you keep on saying go slow. You keep on saying go
mm,
slow. You keep on saying go slow. And so
mhm,
I get it, right? I get it. It's like you're trying to be a realist, right? And you're trying not to get your hopes up too high because like you do not want to be disappointed, right? Like
mm,
um but dare I say,
mm,
imagine what you have been told is impossible.
mhm. Yeah.
Imagine the impossible. And and then see what happens. I think that like I think that our ancestors knew about the power of imagining. They knew about it in ways that were visceral and deep and universe shifting and altering, reality altering, right?
Yeah.
Um and so dare I say that like, okay, all right, maybe it won't happen in your lifetime, but you know what though? It could.
Mhm.
Because I truly do believe that white supremacy is dying and capitalism is being revealed for the con that it is.
Mhm. Yes.
And
Agreed.
and that you know, I always, I tell folks sometimes that my very existence is a manifestation of what my ancestors knew was possible, what my
Mm,
ancestors um, you know, believed was possible.
yeah.
And that they were told is impossible.
Yeah.
My existence is a manifestation of the miracles of the universe, of the great magic of making what was thought to be impossible possible.
Mm,
And so, if I can exist here on this call with you, speaking through space and time, because we're on 2 different time zones, right? I'm on
yeah.
Piscataway people's lands here in DC. You're on Omaha people's lands, right?
Yes.
In Nebraska, you're on Central Time. I'm on Eastern Standard Time. We're speaking through
Yes.
time and space.
Yes. Yeah. Thank
Then it's
you.
possible.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, thank you for that abundance mindset. And for gently repositioning my lens. Again, this is why you're called a healer. Got it. I want to thank you. I want to thank you for allowing Omaha to see for Black trans girls. And I mean that in a this is a gift, and it is a deep gift to receive it, to be in um to be in proximity to the script. Eventually the audience will be in proximity to not just your words, but your talent and the talent of the cast. And that is genuinely a gift. And so I thank you so much for this. I feel healed in a way that I haven't in a minute. But I thank you for sharing yourself and your work and your experience, and for talking about liberation and for being relentless. Like, I love that. Thank you for those things, because they are like, quite literally, again, to just bring up this theme, they are how other people can radically reimagine. They are how we collectively can recover what it means to be in community. This is how we can imagine and reimagine new ways of being, to just use your brilliant words one more time. And so thank you, genuinely.
You are sweet, and thank you for, sitting down with me for this 45 minutes to an hour, right? And chatting with me, you know, about these things. I think that, someone once told me, we were having a conversation, like, we were having a conversation about, like, is the right word liberation, right, for what we're talking about, like, or have we not really found the right word? Like, we know what it feels like, right? Like, I talk about sometimes, I was like, and I said to them, right, I said, even if liberation is not the right word, we know that when we say liberation, what that would feel like. 'Cause something is like, it's like the possibility of that tastes sweet. And so if we learn in a few years, right, that liberation was not the right word, I said to this person, perhaps what we're talking about is love,
Yeah.
right? That freedom from oppression, that freedom from oppressive systems, that freedom from harm. Maybe love is the right word, right? Like, so I don't know why I just brought that up in this closing moment of this interview.
Because you're like, you have more wisdom to give yet.
But I will say that, like, especially to all the Indigenous trans folks out there, all Black trans folks out there, like, you have the right to agency and autonomy and to exist. You have the right to understand your divinity and to understand that you are essential to this world. So yeah, if they've gotten nothing else from this conversation, hopefully they have gotten that.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.